The jury selection process varies wildly from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In federal court, judges often do most of the heavy lifting themselves. In New York State court, for example, where the Harvey Weinstein trial is underway, the attorneys are heavily involved. They question potential jurors directly, asking them about the facts they're likely to confront in this particular case. The number of jurors can vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In New York civil court, for example, you may only get 6 jurors, but in criminal court, you're guaranteed 12 jurors in a trial. Here at NBC News, we've simulated an actual courtroom. The major players in any criminal trial are, of course, the judge, the lawyers, the criminal defense lawyer and the prosecutor, and then the jury. It could be 12 jurors and then 2 or maybe more alternate jurors who are selected in case one of the original jurors has to leave. A high-profile case like Harvey Weinstein's could take weeks, maybe even months, depending on how efficiently the court moves. Jury selection alone can take weeks because it's really hard to find someone who has either heard nothing at all about the case or someone that has heard about it but can still be fair and impartial. We're looking at this case because the Harvey Weinstein allegations were the catalyst for the Me Too movement. Since that time, people from all over the globe have come forward with their own Me Too stories. Tell me about the statistics on sexual assault in the United States.
We know that approximately 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men experience what we would refer to as a completed rape. We also know that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men have some kind of contact sexual experience that's unwanted.
With so many people being affected by sexual violence, is it even possible to pick a fair and impartial jury for sex crimes cases? I called a fellow criminal defense attorney who does this all the time to learn more about the jury selection process. Hey, Marnie, it's Danny.
Hey.
Listen, when you have a sex crimes case, I mean, the reality is that many people in America are either victims of sex crimes or they know someone. With that many people touched by crime, is it possible to find jurors who have no contact whatsoever with victims of a crime?
I don't know that any jury ever has been completely unbiased because we are and impartial, because we're picking from people who are human beings who bring their own common sense and their own experiences there. What you're hoping is that they can at some point understand that they need to set those biases aside in order to be a juror.
Let me ask you this, Marnie. In a case like Harvey Weinstein's, does one post pro-Me Too or anti-Me Too in a sex crimes case, is that enough to get a juror tossed?
I don't know that it will be. Now that we're kind of farther away from November of 2017 when the movement really started, so many people have posted, and so many people have supported others who posted, and it's not always meaningful as to how that person would feel in the courtroom. I posted too. I think it's an important movement. I don't think that jurors should be considering the Me Too movement in the courtroom when their mandate is to think about each case individually.
If you're on the defense in a case like Harvey Weinstein, do you use a peremptory if you find out that a prospective juror has posted about Me Too?
I think you're going to run out very, very quickly.
During the questioning, lawyers have unlimited challenges for cause if they truly believe a juror cannot be impartial. Lawyers do have a limited number of peremptory strikes. These are no questions asked dismissals that the prosecution or defense can use, so long as they are not founded on race or sex. Anytime a jury is being selected, you're going to hear 2 words over and over again. They are voir dire. It's a very old phrase that loosely translated means to speak the truth. But today, it's the process by which we take a lot of potential jurors and whittle them down to the 12 that will sit on this jury. KRISTEN, as a criminal defense attorney in sexual assault cases, one of the things I'm going to be looking for is whether or not a prospective juror is either a victim of sexual assault or knows someone close to them that is a victim of sexual assault. And candidly, I may try to remove them on that basis. Is that the right thing to do, or should courts be doing something different?
It's probably not the right thing to do. Just because you have experienced this crime or know somebody who has, it doesn't mean you have any kind of factual information about how perpetrators behave or what normal victim responses are. You only know your own individual experience.
So it sounds like you're saying that it isn't the case that all victims of sexual assault will tend to automatically believe other folks reporting sexual assault.
I think that that's true. What you want to be looking for in a jury is whether or not somebody has the ability to be unbiased and weigh the evidence that's presented in that court case. So it really depends on what kind of exposure people have had to the facts about what is the most common way to facilitate sexual assaults, common offender behaviors, and frankly, that is knowledge that most of America does not have.
What should prosecutors, defense attorneys, and even jurors keep in mind during a trial like this?
We know that sexual assault is one of the most underreported crimes in this country. We know it's something that is vastly misunderstood. I think anybody who's involved in a criminal trial around sexual assault just simply needs to pay attention to the evidence that is presented and to suspend some of the beliefs that you may have from your outside life.
Jury selection for me is my least favorite part of the trial process. It's full of stereotypes and bias and prejudgments about people based on their job and where they live. Ultimately, the whole jury selection process is inherently flawed. It's crazy to think that by knowing a total stranger for a few minutes and asking him or her a few questions, that you can learn that much about them to know whether or not at their core they're going to harbor some bias for or against a defendant. Although the system is flawed, it's probably the best system we can hope for, because you really can never look into someone else's heart and know the way a juror is going to decide.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.